Here we go. This is the Nikon D7000. I'm just going to talk to you really quick about how to use it in class. First, the cameras are labeled. This happens to be Nikon D7000B, and so I want to find the battery Nikon D7000B. And when I'm finished using this, I always want to put it in the charger so that the battery is charged for the next person who's going to use it, and that next person might be you. All right, the battery goes into the handle. That's where it goes. You clip that in there. The SD card also goes in the handle from the side. There are two slots. It really doesn't matter which slot you put your SD card in, but we're going to go ahead and put it into slot 1. So there it is. The camera, it's ready to go. It's got a battery, it's got a lens, it's got an SD card. To erase the SD card, first of all, I'm going to switch it to on. Here's the on switch. I switch it to on. To erase the SD card, I can go into the menus and do everything. Or I have this button here. It has this little red picture or icon, and this button here, which is the garbage button, also has a little red icon. And if I hold both of those together, the screen will say FOR, and then if I push them again, I just erased everything off the card, and we are good to go. Before I start recording, I do want to go into the menus. So I push menu, and there's a little picture of a camera. I want to go in there, and I want to check the movie settings. I want to make sure that manual movie settings are on, and I want to make sure the movie quality is set to what I want it to be. We have two choices, really, 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second. If I'm making something movie-esque, I want 24 frames per second. If I'm filming something for the broadcast, the announcements, or for television, I'm probably going to use 30 frames per second. So I make sure that those, I have the one I want selected, and once again, manual movie settings are on. Maybe I want to change the microphone sensitivity settings, and I click OK. And I'm good to go. There are lots of other settings. We're not going to, this is just to get you quick and working on the DSLR. All right. Next, we want to make sure that this dial over here is set to M for manual mode. And we're going to take control over all the settings on the camera. And we're not going to go into depth about what all the settings like ISO and aperture and shutter speed all mean. That's for a different tutorial. This is just how to use the camera. And the first thing I want to talk to you is we're in manual mode. I want to show you shutter speed. So I switched this dial to put it into live view. That LV right there means live view. And so I can see on the camera what I'm filming, okay? And down here, these numbers are shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And our shutter speed we can change with this dial. And if I'm filming at 24 frames per second and I want it to look like I'm making a movie, I want my shutter speed to be roughly double. And on this DSLR, a shutter speed of 50. If I'm, because I'm shooting at 24 frames per second. Now, if I had chosen in my movie settings 30 frames per second, I might move this dial and turn it to 60. Now, those are really your only two choices that you want to make. You can go a little slower, but you can't go slower than 30. And many times you'll see people who jack it up to like 8,000. People come and say, Mr. Watson, I can't see anything on the screen. And that's because somebody jacked up your shutter speed to 8,000. And so we want our shutter speed, like I said, to be right around 50. Our aperture is right now at f2.8. Now to change the aperture on this camera, I physically have to move this dial right here that's on the lens. It's the closest one, and there's some little numbers up there. That says 5.6, and if I look back here, that says 5.6. Now if I change this to f1.8, and I look on the back, it's going to say f1.8. So that's how you change the aperture. To change the ISO, so here's the ISO right here. To change the ISO, I hold down the button that says ISO, and I can move this dial. Now remember, if I move that dial without pushing that button, I'm changing the shutter speed. And I don't. I want to change the ISO. So I hold down the ISO button. You really, on this particular camera, you really don't want to go above 1600 if you can help it. And ideally, you would be shooting at the lowest ISO possible. And let's just put it at 200. So I'm shooting at 50, a shutter speed of 50, an aperture of f1.8, and an ISO of 200. And that's how you change those on the camera. And then when you want to start recording, you push that red button and it starts your recording. And right there it says it's recording, the timer's going. I want to show you how to focus. So just like there was this dial right here where we changed the aperture, well, this is how you change your focus. And you can put things into focus. Now, this particular lens, I can't focus on something that's 2 inches away. But so there you go. That is how you use the DSLR, the Nikon D7000. That's how you do the ISO, shutter speed, and aperture, and how you record. And really quick, I do want to show you white balance. There's this thing called white balance, and once again, to change the white balance, on this camera I push the WB button, and I can scroll through different white balances. So you want to, when you're shooting with a DSLR, you do want to get your white balance as close to as what you actually want in the camera. On some cameras, you might choose to really change the white balance and some of the color grading afterward. On a DSLR, you really want to get your white balance as close to what you want as you can possibly get in camera. All right, right on.